So if you look at the scenario, we've got potentially another election next year. That's quite possible. Got increased interest rates. We've spent all of the money, the play money to stimulate the economy. Now they're trying to slow down the economy, which seems quite ironic actually. 1 minute, it's only 12 months ago we've been told to get out there and spend and help everyone get the economy going. Now we're saying stop spending. So this is really quite a bizarre period that we're running through. Do you think people are becoming almost quite blasé about it and actually just getting on with their life, or where's it? What do you think? Sort of extending from previous discussion about next year, can you see property, the big bubble burst, or where's it happening?
Yeah, I think people have become more conservative. They are more thoughtful about their finances now. And what we've seen in terms of consumer behaviour, just over the last 6-12 months, is a change in people's attitude. You go back a couple of years ago and Australians would whack things on the credit card and wouldn't be too worried about the consequences. When they'd go out and spend, they'd buy the little luxuries in life. We'd spend up on things like, say alcohol and gambling. But you look at consumer spending habits now, and the fastest area of growth is insurance. We seem to be insuring our cars ourselves, our life insurance. We've cut back on gambling. We've cut back on alcohol. We've still got the little luxuries in life. We're rewarding ourselves for perhaps going down to Coles and Woolworths, buying the cheapest tea bags, buying the cheapest coffee. So we're saving in that, and we're saying, okay, now it's the time for us to reward ourselves a little bit. And people are, buying some jewellery or watches. They might be taking themselves to the Gold Coast for a weekend. So you have this barbell strategy which is happening at the moment. And I think this conservatism that we're seeing, this change in behaviour, is actually a very good thing. People aren't taking for granted that they're going to have a job and that house prices will rise forever, and they're not going to be affected by interest rate hikes. They're a little bit more thoughtful about it.
Craig, we're finding in the field exactly that. People are taking longer to make a decision to purchase their property. There's more homework going into it, and there's not that urgency that we've experienced for probably 10 years. So, and that gets back to this more conservative approach to pretty much exactly what you're saying, to everything, including, from your groceries to the big ticket property prices. Yeah. What about investments and property versus shares?
Well, I think at the moment people are looking at all the asset markets, and they're looking at house prices, and they have been doing very well over the last 12, 18 months. But housing is always a matter of supply and demand. We've had more supply of homes come onto the market. We've had less in terms of demand because of higher interest rates. So we've had a better balance, and therefore house prices aren't growing to the same extent as in the past. Still a pretty healthy growth, and we would be looking for house price growth, something like 5 to 8% annual rather than up around the double-digit annual pace. I think in terms of the share market, it's basically been going sideways. Still pretty good returns, because once you add in dividends, it's not too bad. And then you look at cash, you look at things like term deposits, they're pretty attractive. I think what we're telling people is, say, well, why don't you put some of your money into property, some of your money into shares, some of your money into fixed interest, some of your money, say, into international shares. Spread your investments around. It's the old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's probably the best strategy in the current environment.
And do you see rents, from what you're seeing around Australia, rents rising, so those landlords or would-be landlords, investors in property, starting to get a little bit better return because they've dropped away a lot over the last 15 years with the increase in the prices?
Yeah, I think it does vary significantly from city to city, because in some capital cities you've seen, like Melbourne and Darwin, house prices growing something like 15 to 20% a year. You go to places like Brisbane and it's around about 4% growth in house prices, and South Australia it's been closer to 8 to 9 odd percent. So different sorts of trends that we're seeing around the place. What generally holds, though, is that the market is still quite tight. It's still the case that demand and supply, population's rising, we're still not meeting it in terms of new supply, and that continues to keep upward pressure on rents, and I think that's going to be maintained somewhat. We don't have a housing oversupply, we still have an undersupply. While ever you've got that situation, there's going to be putting upward pressure on rents.
I want to come back to South Australia very specifically in a minute, but just before we do, and I know that I've already mentioned this once, but there's all of these articles that continue to bob up and about this 40% drop or 40% overvaluation of Australian property. Just in a succinct way, how do you talk to that?
It's always about supply and demand. It always comes down to supply and demand. If somebody can tell me that there's an oversupply of property on the market, and that's going to push down prices, well, I'm happy to entertain the view that house prices will go down. If there was a situation where the government wound back population growth in a big way, then I'd be a little bit concerned because you don't have the demand coming through. But we need migrants. We need more and more people here in Australia. So population's continuing to grow and therefore demand. Supply just isn't keeping up with the task. We've got a number of state governments around the place that aren't releasing the amount of land that we need. Still providing a degree of hardship for developers in putting new proposals together. Australia is undersupplied with housing. As a result, prices are quite appropriate for the sort of market that we have.
There's a fixation also in comparing Australia's market with the States, and it is, as we know, completely different structure, isn't it? Do you want to just describe that to everyone, the recourse, non-recourse loans, just so everyone can understand very succinctly what the massive difference is of the way that the lending has been?
Well, here in Australia, if you couldn't repay your housing loan, well, you're still going to be liable. You're still going to be liable for the loan that you've taken out. In the States, though, they've had non-recourse home loans, so they can't pay the mortgage repayments, so they just walk away.
They send the keys, jingle mail, send the keys back, and that's it.
No obligation to them, sort of no requirement for them to repay and that's just, we just find that hard to believe. So in most parts of the world, you would find that hard to believe. So it's just not the same sort of market. Sort of they've had some problems with the subprime market. Sort of the lower tier of lending. Here in Australia, lenders have actually been increasing the demands for deposits by individual borrowers to make sure that they have got the wherewithal to be able to make the higher repayments.
Now, Craig, in the first home owners market where they had the super bonus, the stimulus package, we were concerned that market might drop off at the end of the stimulus package with the interest rates rising. But our experience has been that the banks were so cautious with their lending during that period that in fact that hasn't occurred. Do you think that's yet to come, or do you think we're okay on first home owners who've bought in who probably shouldn't have bought property?
I think the banks have done the right thing by all concerned in that when there was super strong demand for loans, that effectively banks tightened the requirements. They made sure that there was extra deposit, so there was they made extra checks to make sure that people could make the repayments on time and in full. And that's going to hold us in very, very good stead going forward. There is a case that there's less in terms of government grants out there, less in terms of the bonuses and the like, and that has choked off a degree of the demand for first home buyers. But the fundamental issue is people have got to live somewhere.
That's right.
And if they're not buying their own property, they've got to rent a property. So, but I think most people view home ownership still in a very positive way, that they want to get in the market, they want to get that start, and then they can trade up over time and increase their wealth.